Canada's energy sector continues to struggle during the COVID-19 pandemic. Where are we headed when it comes to our country's oil and gas industries? Joining me now from Calgary is Cody, Battershill, founder of Canada Action. It's a volunteer-led grassroots movement encouraging Canadians to take action in support of natural resources sector. Cody, welcome back to Bridge City News.
Thank you so much for having me again. I really appreciate the opportunity to be back with you.
Oh, absolutely, Cody. Now, with current government oil and gas policies limiting investment and exports, do we have numbers really right now as to how much this is impacting the overall Canadian economy?
What we know is that over the last several years, we have imported millions of dollars per day of oil from other countries. We know that we have lost out on billions of dollars of potential government revenues. We know that we have lost out on investment and job creation to the tunes of hundreds of billions of dollars. And this is a part of the anti-pipeline campaign that is uniquely targeted Canada. And now during this COVID crisis, we see that we need a strong, competitive energy industry more than ever to get our economy back on track and to support Canadian jobs for Canadian families.
Why do you think it is that Ottawa's so anti-pipeline, especially when it comes to supporting Alberta's energy sector? They'd rather bring in oil from Saudi Arabia?
Well, it's interesting because you have the Trans Mountain pipeline that is moving forward, and that's very, very important. But when it comes to Energy East and when it comes to Northern Gateway, these are other projects that did need to get built for Canada to achieve full value for our resources, which benefits all Canadians. Additionally, with Energy East, we were going to be able to upgrade and refine more of our oil, get more Western Canadian oil to Eastern Canadian consumers, and that would have displaced other foreign oil imports coming into the country, also allowing for us to export potentially into Europe and other countries around the world. We know that there's strong demand for our oil, our natural gas, and our resources around the world. Countries want to do business with Canada, and we need to make sure that we have a competitive environment. I like to say that we should have an all-inclusive energy platform rather than a non-inclusive, because it's great to support wind and solar, but we also need to be supporting oil and gas.
So let's talk about some of those pipelines. You mentioned Trans Mountain as well, Energy East, which is dead on the table, I guess. Which ones are up and running and which ones are still facing regulatory hurdles?
Well, the important one right now that we see under construction is Trans Mountain. And Trans Mountain, they're under construction in Kamloops. That pipeline, there's a lot of misinformation that's put out by the anti-pipeline groups. So the original project has been operating since 1953. Marine shipments since 1956. There has never been a marine incident or a catastrophe. They are expanding the project now, which will get more Canadian oil into Burnaby, where we can then export that down into California or over into Asia. We are sending oil to Asia now, and it's so important that we diversify our customers as much as possible away from the United States so that we can get the best global price for our oil. Currently, just in the last couple of weeks, we have seen refiners in Spain and in India looking to buy Canadian oil. Now, the frustrating part, though, is that they're looking to buy it through the US because we have not built enough of our own pipelines. So there's a good example of this missed opportunity. And going forward, as a country, we need to be talking about how we're going to solve that. The other project that is already built in Canada, but it's still awaiting some final permitting in the US, is the Line 3 project. That's actually just a replacement project for an existing pipeline to upgrade it to brand new modern technology. That's very important. As well, we still have Keystone XL, the saga of Keystone, under construction in some parts of Canada and the US, including the border crossing. Very important for North American energy security. And we've seen over the last 10 years, as long as Keystone has been opposed, global oil demand increased by about 10 million barrels per day until pre-COVID. And the biggest benefactors of the opposition to Keystone were Venezuela, Mexico, Saudi Arabia, Brazil, and Ecuador, countries that obviously do not support Canadian jobs, and also countries that often have inferior environmental, social, and governance standards. So a very important part of the conversation really is who benefits when Canadian pipelines are blocked.
Cody, Alberta Premier Jason Kenney has decided to lift the cap on crude oil production as of December. What does this really mean for the energy sector?
Well, it means that there's some increased confidence now in pipeline capacity and in storage in Alberta because the curtailment was brought in to help manage the differential. If we can get Trans Mountain built, if we can get Line 3 finished, if we possibly get Keystone, plus there's some other pipeline maintenance and debottlenecking projects, if we can get increased pipeline capacity, we won't have to necessarily worry about the massive discounts again, the way that they were. I mean, at one point we were losing, $100 million a day, selling the world's most regulated oil as a top producer with the most heavily discounted price. And there's a huge disconnect between those two statements. So this lifting of the curtailments is positive overall. We obviously want to see Alberta as an investment as a jurisdiction for investment, for job creation, and for continued growth in our oil and natural gas industry. And this is one step in that sequence.
So, how would you respond to the objections from environmentalists on the decision to lift the cap?
Well, there's just so many decisions and so many things that are being said by some of these groups. And let's be clear, all Canadians support the environment, but Canadians do not support giving opportunity and jobs that could be benefiting our families and our communities to other countries with weaker environmental standards. A lot of these groups, they say they care about the climate, they say they care about the environment, but their actions do not match up with the words. Because if those two statements were in fact what they valued, they would be supporting Canadian energy getting to the world, Canadian energy production increasing, and they would also be having a balanced, constructive conversation about how we can continue working together to improve our environmental footprint. But they would recognize we are already leading on so many regards and so many metrics. And as Canadians, we really truly should be proud of our people, our resources, and our record.
Any thoughts on the recent merger between Cenovus and Husky, the $3.8 billion stock deal? Now, we're talking about some serious job losses, around 2,000 positions, Cody.
Yeah, and it's so sad, and I just feel for everyone. I mean, we've been watching now for many years, and we need to get back to a position where Canada can compete internationally. We need to get back to a position where companies want to invest in Canada rather than leaving Canada. In this situation, I'm glad that the headquarters is staying in Canada. It's not like Cenovus could have invested in the US or they could have invested overseas, but they did buy another Canadian or merge with another Canadian company. There are some positives, but that doesn't diminish the serious impact to families. And we need a strong energy sector so that we can grow jobs and grow opportunity for our communities again in the future. And hopefully, a strong Cenovus will be able to do that in the years to come.
Now, there's some good news for Calgary. Suncor announced that they're moving their Ontario Petrocan head office to the Stampede City. That should affect around 700 workers, and the company says it will ensure that they remain competitive for the long term. How so?
Well, we want our companies competitive, and so I think moving those that staff into Calgary, we have a lot of great office space. We have a great quality of life, a great place to live. We're going through some economic challenges, and so bringing these positions here, it might mean potentially some local hiring if people can't move. And anytime we hear jobs coming to Calgary, that's a good thing. And we hope to get back into that trend going forward for the future because, again, we have the people, we have the knowledge, the innovation, the ingenuity, the expertise, the experience, and we should be a choice jurisdiction for investment for any energy company anywhere in the world that cares about the environment. They should be doing business in Alberta and in Canada.
Alberta definitely has the infrastructure to support our energy industry. Cody, solar and wind energy only accounted for about 4% of total U.S. consumption in 2019. The green energy lobby says fossil fuels need to be scrapped as soon as possible. But at this rate, is that anywhere near realistic?
It's not realistic. And this is not a conversation where we should be asked to choose between oil or solar, natural gas or wind. The reality is we need all of the above. And that's why we have to have this all-inclusive conversation. You cannot build a solar panel or a wind turbine without massive volumes of mined materials, oil and natural gas, and other advanced resources that have been come from the earth. And at the end of the day, we still know that right now we do not have the backup battery technology to store wind or solar energy when the sun's not shining and the wind is not blowing. So the reality is, when you look around the world right now at where some of these intermittent renewables are, they're not there yet. And it is not fair, it is not honest to be telling people that we need to make this choice today because they themselves cannot make that choice. Oil, it's been said that even in 2040, when all cars might be sold as electric vehicles, oil demand will still be around 2012 or 2013 levels because of plastics, petrochemicals, and other uses. So the fact is, oil and gas are going to be critical parts of the global energy mix for decades to come. And if we don't invest in our own production, other countries will take that market share and the environment will be worse off. And if we don't invest, period, then we will have massive, crippling shortages of energy, and we will all experience what it was like to live 75 or 150 or 200 years ago without modern energy supply and the products that we all depend on that are derived from oil and natural gas.
So with the continuing push for green energy, though, Cody, many are saying that global demand for oil is dropping off the charts. But you know what? You and I have both seen what's happening in the United States, China, India. Nothing could be further from the truth.
China's got record oil imports right now, year over year. You also have to address depletion. Every year, the world loses some of the existing oil supply that runs out. If we don't invest in recreating that supply, even when demand is flat, we are going to have an acute energy shortage. So oil demand, when Keystone XL was originally proposed, was around 90 million barrels per day. And in February of this year, pre-COVID, oil demand was right around 100 million barrels per day. It dropped down to say 90 million. It's back up to 95, 96 right now. And back into 2022 or 2023, all of the major forecasting agencies expect oil demand will be back above 100 million barrels per day, and it will grow for at least another decade or two. And you have to replace depletion. So where should that supply come from? And for anyone who cares about the environment, human rights, worker safety, and for any Canadian that cares about Canadian opportunity, jobs, and prosperity, I firmly believe that the world needs more Canadian energy for those reasons.
Cody, let's talk about coal for just a moment. Are you able to comment on the Grassy Mountain Coal Project in the Crow's Nest Pass? Is it possible to protect wildlife and the environment while at the same time creating hundreds of new jobs in the region?
It's absolutely possible. That's the Canadian way. And if this project goes through a rigorous, thorough environmental regulatory process, and if it's found to be in the public economic interest in a way that can balance environmental protection, then it absolutely has merit. The reality is right now, global coal use is actually still growing, and we have thousands of new coal-fired power plants around the world. Plus, you also have metallurgical coal for making steel and other products that we all use every day without even realizing how they come to be. And so if we can produce Canadian resources to our high environmental standards and get that to the world, we create jobs for Canadians, we protect the local environment while also protecting the global environment with our leading standards. And so if the project can go through that process and is found to be balanced between the two, then absolutely it could proceed.
What is the overall outlook in 2021 for our energy sector? What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm optimistic because there's been such a decline around the world in oil and gas drilling, specifically oil drilling. Norway has cut back substantially. The U.S. has cut back substantially. And so if we can get through COVID, and if demand starts to come back to where it was, in the next 1 to 2 years, I think right now it looks like, and many market commentators would say that it looks like we could have a little bit of a supply shortfall. And it's a good opportunity for Canada because we have well-regulated, environmentally progressive, long life opportunities in the oil sands and in our conventional oil and gas industry with leading environmental metrics to help meet that demand. And we want to see rigs working. We want to see people employed. We want to see families successful, and also the economic opportunity One stat that is absolutely mind blowing: from 2000 until 2018, the women and men who work in our oil and gas industry in the oil and gas sector generated $380 billion for Canadian governments. That is an example of the foundational opportunity, the fundamental opportunity that our resource sector has been and can continue to be for our country.
You would think maybe the Trudeau Liberals would realize, hey, we're sitting on a gold mine here in Alberta. Why not tap into it, help develop those resources, and pay off some of our debt and get the deficit under control?
We need our resources firing on all cylinders. We need to support all jobs in all sectors. So support tourism, support tech, support manufacturing, but also support oil and gas and support energy in an all-inclusive manner. The fact is, oil and gas is one of the most tech-forward industries in the country. Resources account for such a huge part as well of our manufacturing base. The oil and gas industry does business with thousands of companies across Canada and is our largest export and has been the largest reason for our trade surplus over the last several years. So, we are a resource nation. We are a nation of amazing people, amazing animals, amazing places like our national parks and our natural resources that we have developed using Canadian innovation, Canadian ingenuity. And we need to be champions of this opportunity we have. Other countries call it a blessing and a gift, and it's so important that we all speak up in support of a balanced, constructive conversation about why the world needs more Canadian resources.
Amen to that. Cody Battershill, founder of Canada Action, thanks for joining me today from Calgary.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and thanks for watching.